Dr. Emily Cady, 1848 to 1941. She was an American author. She was a homeopathic physician. And although she was not a Unity minister, she is perhaps best known for her Unity classic book, Lessons in Truth. Lessons in Truth is considered by many to be Unity's basic textbook. I argue that the Bible is our basic textbook, except that there's nothing basic about it. Many Unity churches and centers require reading Lessons in Truth for membership. I no longer require Lessons in Truth, not because it isn't valuable, but because our language has changed in the last 130 years. And someone reading this book today has to wade through the Victorian era verbiage and style. I've had this wild notion for years that I might update Lessons in Truth for a modern audience. And hopefully, over the next several weeks, I will focus on this work, perhaps laying the groundwork for the project. Emily Cady was a highly skilled writer, but she was also good at shunning publicity and keeping herself in the background. Her literary ability and mastery of a clear, universal, almost timeless prose are evident. She wrote in the 19th century, and most books of that era reflect their period's literary tastes and styles, including very flowery speech, words that seem strange to our ears, and classical allusions that are now lost on most of us. But like the Fillmores, Miss Cady wrote in a relatively plain style for her readers. This clear writing style and articulation of truth principles appealed to Charles Fillmore, and in 1895, Charles asked Emily Cady to write a series of articles for Unity magazine, which Unity later published as the book we now know as Lessons in Truth. So before we get into the text, I need to comment on the title, Lessons in Truth. Now, the word truth used to be a generic name for what we now call New Thought philosophy. And this language is still with us, at least a little. For instance, instead of a Unity person or a New Thought person, I will sometimes refer to myself as a truth student. A truth student. In using the word truth, we do not mean that New Thought is true and everything else is false. New Thought is right and everything else is wrong. That's not the meaning. As truth students, we follow a course of study that turns the world upside down. We should turn any beliefs that we have over and see if there's an expiration date on the bottom. Truth teachings show us a path that frees us from the bondage of limited thinking and allows us to think from a source of infinite love and wisdom within us. In John 8:32, Jesus says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." The promise that the truth will set us free is what makes these teachings so attractive. And the idea that freedom is possible makes giving up our illusions an easy choice. The book Lessons in Truth begins with a simple but powerful suggestion, and this is a direct quote, that we so far as possible, lay aside for the time being all previous theories and beliefs. By so doing, we will save ourselves from the trouble of trying to put new wine into old wineskins. That's from Luke 5:37. New wine into old wineskins. That Jesus quote reminds us not to try to put new ideas into the same old consciousness. To learn and grow spiritually, we must unlearn some of the things that we have learned. We must empty the teacup before we can fill it again. And to amplify this concept, our author tells us to think positively by quoting Philippians 4:8. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about those things. Positive thinking is a considerable part of Unity's teachings. Positive thinking propels us into a new life of possibilities. The first chapter bears the title, Bondage or Liberty? Which? And it begins, every man believes himself to be in bondage to the flesh and to the things of the flesh. All suffering is the result of this belief. And from this point forward, I will endeavor to remove all the male pronouns and modernize the language. We all believe that we are human beings, trapped in a human body, having human relationships, and living a human life. These things are true, but they are not the whole truth. These erroneous ideas are why we suffer. In human life, pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. Dr. Katie offers Moses and the Exodus as an allegory for this suffering. Exodus 3:7-8. The Lord said to Moses, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and bring them up out of the land to a good and a spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Dr. Katie tells us that our desire for liberation comes from God's presence within us. Our higher self, the Christ within, the Atman, knows the darkness and ignorance we must face in a human life. God's presence within knows our sorrow and our distress caused by the cruel taskmasters of sickness, sorrow, and poverty. God has come down to free us from this servitude, meaning that all the spiritual resources of the universe are available now to deliver us out of this suffering and bring us up into a new life. However, we must first come into a new awareness to attain this new life. We must wake up. We must believe that it is possible. Dr. Katie reminds us that, like the prodigal son, we must get tired of eating husks. We have to get tired of our old ways. Arise, wake up, and go to our Mother, Father, God, the source of all life. God is not a stern autocrat, the big boss in the sky, who insists that we bow or grovel or pray in a very specific way. Instead, God is an expression of the order of divine law, the law of all love and all good. Our human selves live in a selfish animal part of our consciousness. But we can choose to grow. We grow into a divine or a spiritual understanding. We wake up. We come to ourselves, the big aha moment, and we know that we are one. We are one with God and all creation. We acquire this consciousness. When we acquire this consciousness, we free ourselves from all human suffering because we have achieved conscious dominion over our lives. At some point along our journey, our human consciousness, our intellect, gladly lets go of our need to control. We let go. We let God. We say yes to our spiritual self, the Christ within, and we allow this presence to guide us. Dr. Katie tells us that we have already taken the first step in this journey. We have already become aware of the limitations of our human understanding, the bondage of Egypt in our consciousness. But for us to know, for us to truly know and experience this freedom, the universe, God's presence within, must train us into our freedom. For we have to be trained into our freedom before we get to the land of milk and honey and the complete deliverance of our useless and unnecessary suffering. Sooner or later, we will come to a deep wilderness, some seemingly impassable Red Sea. Something happens in our lives. We're confronted with our human limitations. Our courage will seem to fail us. We may even want to return to Egypt, return to our slave mentality. We must listen to Spirit. And just as Moses said to the trembling children of Israel, Exodus 14:13, fear not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which God will work for you today. We must learn to stand still. We must learn to stand alone with God. Nothing else matters. Nothing else will ever make you the master of your destiny. God's presence within is the source of all life, all health, strength, peace, joy, wisdom, and all the support we will ever need or desire. No one and no thing can give like this indwelling presence. God is the spring of all joy, all comfort, and all power. We may have believed that we were helped and comforted by others, and that we receive joy from outer circumstances and surroundings. But this is only half true. All joy, all strength, all good spring up from a fountain within us, and when we know this truth, If we knew this truth, we would know that nothing that anyone does or says will fail us, or nothing that, this is an odd sentence, I got to modernize this a little bit more. Nothing that anyone does or says or fails to do or say can take away our joy and our good. Our good comes from God and nowhere else. We have not simply traded one style or type of servitude for another. We are no longer slaves to our outer circumstances in Egypt, but neither are we servants or in servitude to God. Our liberty comes from understanding our own minds and our relationship with God, our relationship with all that is. We are not servants. We are children. God does not regard us as servants. We are children of the universe. Romans 8:17, and if children, then heirs. Heirs of God and joint heirs with Jesus Christ. We have a divine inheritance, a heritage. And we are heirs to all wisdom. Even when we make mistakes, we are heirs to all wisdom. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, we are inlets, and we may become outlets of all there is in God. All that God is and has is ours, if we know how to claim our inheritance. Spiritual understanding is not just about the loaves and fishes of manifestation. It's not just about the milk and honey. It comes as part of our inheritance. Spiritual growth is only about knowing the truth. We must learn to be the truth. We must learn to be the love. We must learn to be the wisdom and the life. We must learn to be who we truly are. And let the results, let the loaves and fishes happen around us. When we learn to be children of the universe and accept our heritage, when we learn to say yes to God's presence within, the choice, bondage or liberty, it becomes pretty simple. So I ask, bondage or liberty? Which one do you choose? God bless you all. Well, this is our opportunity, yours and mine, to pour out the gift of God from within us through our tithes and our love offerings. And as we prepare for our offering, and you can send your gifts, your tithes, and let us share this offertory blessing together. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I am joy-filled and grateful. Thank you, God. Now the other sign, and you can send your gifts, your tithes, your love offerings to paypal.me/UnityLincoln. That's paypal.me/UnityLincoln. You can also help us save some banking fees by sending your gift directly to Unity Lincoln, P.O. Box 30209, Lincoln, Nebraska 68503. Or you can go to our webpage at unitylincoln.org, and there you will find a convenient link to donate via PayPal. You can also support Unity Lincoln by liking us on Facebook and subscribing on YouTube. And you can to try. And help us share this affirmation for our church family. Together, Unity Lincoln is blessed to draw the people, funds, and all that is required for the health and growth of our community and peace in the world, heart to heart.